Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, which is part of the Swinburne's Smart Cities Research Institute monthly seminar series. Today, it is also our pleasure to be hosting this as the first webinar of the Trimble Visiting Professionals Program, which is a new collaboration between Swinburne and Trimble in the US. And we look forward to hosting more of these events on a regular basis going forward. Before I introduce our speaker today, I would like to start by acknowledging the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, who are the traditional owners of the land on which Swinburne's Australian campuses are located in Melbourne's East and Outer East. On behalf of those present, I pay my respect to their elders, past, present, and emerging. I also pay my respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people of Australia and hope that the path towards reconciliation continues to be shared and embraced. I now would like to introduce our guest speaker, Devin Levine. Devin is a city planner and urban designer with special expertise in 3D and GIS applications for land use planning and development visualization. He is a principal and co-founder of Housey Levine, a US firm based in Chicago, specializing in all aspects of community planning, urban design, and economic development. Devin's work and innovations have attracted national attention in the US, receiving multiple awards, including a Planning Excellence Award from the American Planning Association. Devin's talk today is on geodesign and how digital innovations in this space can inform planning and enhance public engagement. At the end of the talk, we will have an opportunity for Q&A and some discussion. Welcome, Devin, and we look forward to your presentation.
Great. Thank you so much. All right, I will share my screen and jump right into it. Thank you for the introduction. Thank you to the Smart Cities Research Institute for this opportunity, and Trimble, of course, and the Visiting Professionals Program. Always great to get this opportunity to help share knowledge and show how we are innovating and continuing to sort of push the envelope in our field of planning. So again, my name is Devin Levine. I am really at this point a 3D expert. It didn't start that way. It started as a city planner. I have two brothers. They're both architects. One is in Sydney, Australia. And really my whole life, I sort of aspired to get to a quality of visuals that they were able to produce as architects. And it's interesting now they call me to kind of help them through different things. And then, as Hussein mentioned, our firm, we're in the US, we're starting to do international work, but you'll see throughout this talk here, we pride ourselves in being innovative and trying new things, and we like to have fun while we're doing it. And so, you know, we work a regular work week, but it doesn't feel like that. It feels like we're always sort of having fun while we work and have the pleasure of having some clients that sort of unbridle us and allow us to try different approaches. One of the things we've been known for, and I heard someone refer to this as planning porn, these sort of graphics that planners sort of love, and 3D has been really a staple of our firm since we started using Sketchup in 2004, I believe, is when we first started using Sketchup, and along the way we have always integrated 3D over the 16 years of our firm. All of these done here with Sketchup, using rendering plugins and Photoshop and Illustrator, and knowing that people look to communicate in 3D has always been something that's been important to us, a way to integrate 3D graphics to convey you know, planning concepts. And so simple illustrations like this just nothing. There's nothing too groundbreaking in any of these, but they do add a lot of interest into a planning document. And this one too, a redevelopment of a town center outside of a city outside of Cleveland. Done in SketchUp and rendered with a rendering plugin, just to help these communities envision the possibility. And what this sort of 3D journey led us to was something we called the Geodesign Toolbox. We started to realize that it wasn't just SketchUp, it wasn't just Illustrator, it wasn't just GIS. We created what we said is our Geodesign Toolbox. And we don't stay in any one software for too long. And what we have found is it's sort of a workflow, and that's what geodesign means to us. We know there's a geodesign framework that's put out there by academics, and it's an entire process. But in our company, we think of geodesign as geo-enabled tools that are smarter, can help us make smarter plans. Sort of our firm motto now is planning beyond the pretty picture. And so while we know we put out these pretty graphics, with today's technology, we know that there's science behind the approach as well as data behind the work product. And so I want to highlight a couple of things here. Got a few projects to highlight that'll kind of walk through how we approach a project. And if you're like me, whenever I pick up if I see a graphic that's in a plan or a rendering, I'm always sort of curious how it was done, and kind of wondering how the designer or the architect or the planner did the illustration. And so what I'm going to do is sort of peel back the curtains and sort of give you a look at how we approach a project. So this was a rundown warehouse. A city approached us and said, "Hey, we have this white elephant. No one knows what to do with this warehouse. Can you help us come up with some concept plans for it?" And so if you're paying attention on that geodesign wheel, we still use pen and paper. We take out trace, we start to sketch concepts. We believe your hand can move faster than with a pen than it can on a mouse. And so we'll sketch out concepts, iteration after iteration. And only after we're happy with those concepts, we start to kind of refine them into programs. So these two land use programs, how we're going to sort of keep this existing building and intensify around it. We'll bring it in this case, we bring it into SketchUp and we mass out. So from a massing standpoint, what are we talking about these plans, and how are we going to intensify that site? And this is some of our early work with Esri's City Engine. So we create these rules where we can drag them onto shapes. And this rule we call a detailed building generator. And it develops 3D for us on the fly. And so the rules tell us how tall to extrude the building, what style of windows to put in, the balconies. It's developing 3D geometry through a procedural set of rules. And all the parameters on the right allow us to control the 3D output. And so I mentioned this wheel that we have, and we go back and forth between programs. In this example, we took our building footprints and we had to get windows on a curved wall and awnings on a curved wall. And we wanted to iterate through a bunch of different concepts. And to us, City Engine was a perfect utilization for that. And so we use City Engine, we take that model, we bring it out, and we bring it into then our final rendering. And on this project, I know we had committed to the client one visualization. And what we had found with this workflow of moving back and forth between different software packages, that we were able to give them not just an option A, but an option B, a less dense option. And so at the time that we were able to save with our approach, we were able to pass that savings on to that client. Another way we kind of bring the tools together, this is it's a city in the middle of the United States, middle of Arkansas. It's called Bentonville, Arkansas. It's the home of the Walmart Corporation. And They were getting a lot of growth. Walmart is a huge employer at the corporate level, and they were starting to see a lot of suburban sprawl and disconnected subdivisions. You can see you have these two neighborhoods right next to each other. They're not connected. This one's incomplete. Really just haphazard growth. And so they asked us to kind of help them through a strategy to grow smart. And so just sketching over top of an aerial, we kind of geo-reference this photo in. We sketch, this is how we should connect. There's this riparian corridor we're going to connect. We sort of fade it out. We trace in the streets on top of, and this is now City Engine again, we trace in these streets, and what we do is we take those roads and we apply rules where we now have these 3D roads. We subdivide out the lots. And so now we have a plat of subdivision. We know how this neighborhood is going to sort of be built out. And then we apply the rules. And what we do is we have a library of 3D assets that we've created in SketchUp. And we go in and we rate all those. So all those houses are SketchUp assets done in SketchUp. And we use City Engine to call in these assets to sort of build the scene for us. And so this whole visualization was done in about an hour and a half. And I could tell you, if we had sort of just tried to tackle this from scratch without this approach, it was probably easily a few days, having to draw in all those roads and crosswalks, sidewalks, and houses. But this, our Geodesign Toolbox and going in and grabbing the right tool allows us to really tackle things quickly, and the benefit to the client is quick iterations. And so we're getting feedback. If we find we missed the mark, we can make revisions. We haven't exhausted a project budget. A few years ago at the Esri user conference, we took first place for 3D map, and it was a project we did. We called it an economic win for geodesign. We'd been working with a city in Wisconsin, sort of a northern state in the United States. It was known for furniture manufacturing, and we had done a downtown revitalization plan. Their economy had sort of fallen on rough times, and they were trying to kickstart the revitalization of their city center. And our plan included all of the typical planning documents, planning graphics you'd see: land use, transportation, transit. But this one was key priority sites, and we identified the sites that we felt the city should place a priority on redevelopment. The green ones would be, sites that could add value, weren't necessarily a priority, but if they were able to redevelop, they would add value to their downtown. The ones in that gold color, these were redevelopment priorities: dilapidated uses, vacant sites, large sites under single ownership. The city should place an emphasis on these. And then the ones in red, we said these were catalytic. If these redevelop, they're going to spur investment around them. And these were sort of the game changers. On those gold sites, we used SketchUp again to develop some quick concepts, just show massing. This is how this site should build out: buildings close to the street, parking in the rear, townhomes lining the street with a rear courtyard that has the garage access. And so simple illustrations convey a planning concept and support the rest of our document. But when we looked at the catalyst sites, the city told us there were 5 priorities. And this number 5 here was to attract an employer and jobs to the city center. And so we looked at this area. This area was called the Sawdust District. So I mentioned it's in the northern United States. It was a large furniture manufacturing area. A lot of lumber came through here, and they would make furniture. And as U.S. manufacturing went to China and Mexico, this area in Wisconsin had lost all this work. And so they called this the Sawdust District. It was run down, dilapidated, and they wanted a vision for this key part of their city. So pen and paper, we sort of sketched out. Again, we're showing some major employers down here. They told us they wanted a basketball arena. There were a couple things in here they weren't really upfront with us. They told us they wanted some Class A office space, and they needed a basketball arena. And so, another SketchUp illustration here where we put in the basketball arena, we put in some Class A office space, and we visualized to them what this Sawdust District would look like. And what we later found out was the basketball arena was for an NBA team that was looking for a stadium for their farm system. It's called the G League, I think, the Gatorade League. So it's minor league basketball. The Milwaukee Bucks saw this, said, "This is perfect. Let's build an arena here." Before our plan was even finished with the city, they were under construction, building the arena, and it is now home to minor league basketball. But what we learned was that office space that we had prepared was for this company called Oshkosh Corporation, a $1 billion Fortune 500 company that makes the Humvee for the U.S. Army. And they were getting pressure by the federal government to consolidate all of their operations into onto one site. And what they said was that the Class A office space we had shown in the downtown, I won't go back, but wasn't the right site for them. And they had issued an RFP to cities across the United States to get proposals to relocate their company. And we did some work, and we told them that the city of Oshkosh had told us there was nothing they could do because they were looking for 40 acres of land on an interstate. And the city told us that they didn't have any property that met the criteria, and they were about to lose thousands of jobs. And we did some work in GIS, and we told them, you have a site that fits their needs. It's the city golf course. And whether or not you want to have this conversation, but everything that they're looking for, you own. It's your golf course. And they told us, well, if you can help us envision what this looks like and have a conversation with our residents, we'd be open to it. And so we started to sort of sketch out what it might look like. The golf course was 65 acres. The Oshkosh Corporation only needed 40. So there'd be 25 acres of residual open space. And using SketchUp, we planned out sort of what this campus would look like, and which you're kind of seeing here, these brightly colored shapes. This is this workflow where we design in SketchUp, and we pass those brightly colored shapes into City Engine to transform it into a 3D model. And so we prepared this and prepared these renderings. And we were driving up to Oshkosh from Chicago, and they told us that the meeting was getting moved from City Hall to the convention center. And when we got there were people with signs, save the golf course, save the open space. And we went through our presentation, and we laid out all the jobs that would be saved, what it meant to the local economy, how there would be 25 acres of public open space, and not just a golf course, but parkland. And the first gentleman stood up, and he's like, boy, we could find a new place to golf. If we lose all these jobs, this city is sunk. And so they ultimately decided to sell the golf course to Oshkosh Corporation. And it was something that earned us a Special Achievement in GIS award from Esri. But to us, the real win was the fact that Oshkosh decided to purchase the property and make it their global headquarters. An architect came behind us, did these renderings. They broke ground in 2018, and the building is built now, and this is their site. So I don't know if at this point we had become so comfortable bouncing in and out of these programs where we became cocky, but we started to have sort of fun with 3D. And so we took our office, and every now and then at lunch we unwind and we play some video games and have some good fun office rivalry where we fight each other in a video game called Counter-Strike. And we sort of started to think, me and another one of my employees that does all the 3D work with me, Nick, we started to wonder if we could build our office. And so using SketchUp, City Engine, Photoshop, and ArcGIS Pro, we wanted to see could we get our office into this video game? So we started taking photos around our studio. We had the floor plan. My brother was the architect. He gave us all of his CAD files. We started taking these surveillance photos. Our staff was wondering what was up. We didn't want to tell anyone. We wanted to surprise them. Started measuring all the furniture. And then we started to sort of draft it all out. How big are the desks, the monitors? We took all of these assets and by way of Sketchup was able to sort of shoehorn this into this gaming engine. But we started to look out of our windows. We're right in downtown Chicago, and we have these iconic skylines, high rises, and we said, well, it would be a miss if we just had all of our windows, had our blinds down, and you couldn't see the city of Chicago. So let's see what the city of Chicago looks like. So we built a 3D model of downtown Chicago in GIS, and then using City Engine, we created these view spheres. And we said, well, the one thing about a game engine, it needs to be fast. If you're throwing a grenade at somebody or fighting with someone, the game has to render all of those 3D objects. So it needs to be optimized. And so there's 4,000 buildings in the city of Chicago, probably 16,000 or more facades. What facades can we see from our office? And so we built this visualization analysis, and we said, okay, what are the facades we can see? And then every facade we can't see, let's get rid of those buildings. So we optimized it. And then we started to look at Randolph Street, which is this iconic street, which is where our office is, a theater, city hall. And we started to kind of mass it out. We looked at the pavement. And this is something I think is a nice detail when we do our 3D work now. We try to make our textures a little weathered. A lot of 3D has these pristine streets and painted lines. And the reality is a street looks like that for like one day until a car drives on it. And then you have the tire marks. And so we started really just to kind of see. And so we developed these textures in Photoshop where we took a road and we sort of distressed it, added cracks, and started to bring this into the game engine. These are some crude sketches. So really just with an iPhone, SketchUp, and City Engine, we sort of built this out. And so this is the photo, this is the shot of it in game. And these are, our offices. The windows broken, some are probably threw this is my office, some are probably threw something at me. What we found was the game engine has a beautiful real-time rendering quality to it. And so we started to kind of see what this area looked like. And it really cued us into the potential for game engines as a way to showcase our work. So this is a video. I won't let this run for too long, but you can sort of see the detail that we did, and all of these props and everything done inside of all the interior work with SketchUp. Everything on the outside was GIS, and so it was I think, a good marriage between the two technologies to come together. And something that we thought was remarkable when we finished, and I was working on a blog post, I wanted to sort of see how close we were between our 3D model that we built in this game engine and how close we were to what existed. And so I had sent someone some screenshots, and they said, well, what does it look like in Street View? Can you show us what Street View looks like? And so so this is a Google Street View looking down Well Street. Our office is on the second floor of this building here. And when we transitioned to what we built, it's uncanny how accurate it was. And this is that view down Randolph. And so we did this for fun. We posted it on YouTube, and our phone rang. And it was a city outside of Raleigh, North Carolina, getting a ton of development. and they said, we think what you guys did in this game engine, we need for our town center. They had two areas in town that were very important to them, this TOD East and this McCrimmon Extension. But they had this, as they went through a planning process, the residents kept telling them how important their downtown was. And they were using this to guide their vision for downtown. And I don't want to disparage any urban designers or whoever created this, but I don't even know what this is telling a community. I don't know how a resident could look at this and get excited about the town center. But this was their guiding policy for this town center area. And the planner saw our video game map and he's like, hey, can you come down to Raleigh and help us with this? An area, by the way, right now, Google or Apple is investing $1 billion into this research triangle area. And so this workflow, we told them what we were going to do. We would look at ArcGIS Pro, we'd sketch up some concepts, we'd go to City Engine, Photoshop, back to City Engine, into SketchUp, back to City Engine, into WebGIS, into Photoshop, back to SketchUp, into City Engine to have the final product. And so to give you an idea of how quickly and often we're switching back and forth between programs, this is exactly what we did. And then ultimately we ended up in the Unreal 4 game engine. And so here's this area. This is what they envisioned their town center to be. The existing use, you can see the density around. You have some row houses here, some single family homes. The city had invested a lot publicly, town hall, a lot of civic buildings here. But these areas were sort of backcountry, small single family homes. Some of them were vacant, some were had caught fire and the owners left. And so the city wanted to see this entire area redeveloped. So everything in red, they said, was our new town center. And so we looked at the market, we analyzed the market potential, we looked to see what retailers might be interested, what the opportunity was. We had them send us photos of the types of development they would like to see. So what do you like, what do you not like? So they went around within their city and some of the adjacent cities, sent us some photos. And we prepared a couple alternatives. If I toggle back and forth between these two, you'll see nothing changes because the land use program was set. What they wanted and what they were wrestling with was the issue of density. And alternative one was higher density, taller buildings, parking structures. Alternative two was surface parking lots, one-story buildings, sort of a more rural character. So inside of City Engine, our workflow, we updated the aerial, we referenced in some sketches that had been done. We trace in a street grid. And when we apply our rules for the roads, that dotted area, those become now the redevelopment pockets. So after we have our roads in, we're left with these yellow areas. These yellow areas come out and we bring them into SketchUp where we start to plan how deep are the buildings, where's the parking going to go, how's the on-site circulation work. We plan it down to the detail. Each block became its own little site plan exercise. I mentioned in that example in Oshkosh where we have these brightly colored shapes. The other thing we did in SketchUp, there were some buildings we knew that weren't going to change. These are the municipal buildings. Those all stayed. We modeled those out in SketchUp. So we did 3D work. We drew in the church, the town hall, the planning office. So we brought it into City Engine, and in City Engine, we built dashboards. So as we extrude buildings, we're getting real-time feedback, how many square feet we're adding, how many dwelling units are going in each condominium building, how many square feet of retail, how many office jobs, how much parking do we need? Parking was a big one. We had to make sure this thing parked. And so the two different options, option A and option B, you can sort of see this area here. We had a parking garage and some additional height. We passed this on to our client. They gave us some feedback. We brought that feedback back into City Engine. Again, built out those dashboards so we knew what what exactly we were getting in terms of square feet. We took their local zoning code. So if they had one parking space per dwelling unit, if we increase the height of a building, well, that means we need to add additional parking. And so we need to account for that parking somewhere. That might be we add another story to the parking garage. So we're getting this real-time feedback. You can see I just changed the height of that building and the parking shut up. So now this plan wouldn't be in compliance. I'd have to go onto that parking garage and increase the height of that parking garage to add another story to make sure this parked. And so we went back and forth with our client, looking at the different scenarios and how this could be massed out. And what we did is we published a 3D web scene, and I can give you a link to this at the end of the talk. And our client was able to go in a browser and jump in and view this development and explore it. And so they could toggle between, you can click on any building, and this program reports out how many dwelling units, how many square feet. And this was a concern to me when I came into the web and I went down the main street here. I thought we were creating a cavern. I thought this was going to have a real cavernous effect. I was worried that the community would reject the buildings for being too tall. But we brought it into Unreal, which runs the game Fortnite. Hopefully you've heard of that. It's pretty popular, right? Okay. So we had about 2 weeks to go from here. So 31st is when they told us they wanted us to move forward with the game engine. They did it on the 13th. The big issue here is this is ND, Nick Davis is out. So he's out of the office. And then the following week, Nick is out and I'm out. I'm in Florida and we had to get this done. So I'm at Universal Studios, Nick's up in Wisconsin, and we have to take this and get it into a game engine. And so Nick spent his summer vacation in Sketchup, building out the 3D assets, designing the park sites. You can see he added all of these trees as components that would later be brought back into Unreal and replaced. I spent some time in Photoshop creating textures. I mentioned those roads. For us, it was important to kind of sell it, whether it had cracks, manholes, patches, created a whole library of streets, and then made basically this line of code randomizes those streets, adds cracks, adds manholes, adds patches. And so you take a street and just from inside of City Engine, we could kind of make it look like it's a real road. And so we delivered this to the community. Scenario A, less dense. Scenario B, more dense. And again, every single one of those buildings has attributes tied to it, A and B. And we also added playability. We gave them an Xbox controller, and they can control this avatar and walk him through the downtown. And they can toggle between scenario A and scenario B, and can go anywhere. They can explore it. There were a few points where we thought people would have a lot of concern over height. We showed up at their town hall meeting. Their city council had us walk through the different scenarios. And for 10 years, this community had not been able to make a decision about what to do with this town center. And they weren't sure if they wanted one-story rural or multi-story with parking garage, sort of a more urban. And after about 20 minutes of us walking around this digital world, the mayor stood up. He goes, "Well, my mind's made up. I don't know about everyone else." And someone said, "Well, what are you thinking, Mayor?" And he said, "I think we got to go more dense. I think this looks fantastic." And unanimous, right there on the spot, the city council agreed, and we helped them with this design challenge. So a pretty great story. And when we left the town hall, the planning director came to us and said, "This is the best money the city has ever spent." So I mentioned the workflow. It was complicated. You know, we went from GIS, we sketched some concepts, we brought it to City Engine, we put those roads in. We used Photoshop to match in the new aerials, SketchUp to help us design the sites. Back into City Engine to create those dashboards. The client reviewed it. We created those web scenes, Photoshop for the textures, SketchUp to model existing buildings, the props and the trees, and then ultimately Unreal. And so this won a Special Achievement in GIS award last year. And then the last one I was going to say, I wanted to tell you how it feels like all of these projects have sort of snowballed into work. Someone sees one thing and wants it. And so there was a city out here in Chicago that saw that work in Morrisville. And they said, boy, we want that for us. So it's a 35 miles west of Chicago. We have these commuter, it's not far from where I live. We have commuter lines that take us downtown. And we were going through a planning process with them for their entire community. And we did a lot of community outreach. Outreach is a critical part of geodesign. We use a tool called map.social, where residents can go in and create their map of their community. And we get all this great feedback on a map. And we customize the legend. And so people can go in and tell us what's important. They can draw polygons. They can draw where they want bike lanes. And everyone's map is unique. And what they don't know they're doing for us is they're building a GIS data set for us. It allows us to pull everything together to sort of see what a community wants. And what we learned in Glen Ellen was that this downtown, the historic downtown, was something very important to them. They wanted to see it be compact. They want to increase residential density, and they want more stores. They love downtown, and they want to see it vibrant. So, you know, typical land use plan, but one of our key objectives here was to keep downtown vital. The goal, community appearance. You know, it seemed like every recommendation in this plan talked about downtown being vital, and this is what it looks like. I think you know, traditional American inline storefronts, wide sidewalks, of course, a Starbucks. Surprised it's not a Dunkin' Donuts. They got a movie theater, and but despite what they told us in the meetings, and I don't know if you've ever experienced this, they tell us, you know, we want increased density, we want vitality. Every development that was brought forward was shot down. It's too tall, it's too dense, we don't like the look of it, it's wrong materials, we don't like the parking. And time after time after time, all these developments were getting shot down. And so the city asked us, can you build us the ability to take these drawings that we get from developers and put them into a game engine, like you did in Morrisville? This one was a little tricky. We had to work with grade. We took LiDAR information. We took a point cloud. We found the heights of all the buildings, extruded all the building footprints to the height in the LiDAR. There's a LiDAR extraction tool that Esri has where you can identify where trees are from LiDAR information. So we got out these sort of Lego looking trees. And then we started to work in City Engine to build the 3D model of their downtown. And grade was an issue because there was a building that was getting proposed that was going to use grade to its advantage. And I'll show you that in a second. So this couldn't just be a flat area. We had a site that was dropping down 4 feet that wanted to kind of sneak in an extra half story. And that was a point of contention. And so we took the topo and we built a digital elevation map. We brought that into City Engine, and we started to lay our geometry on top of it. And you can see when we do that, we get these, you know, these buildings want to sit flat. We can have them hug the ground, but it wouldn't be a true thing. And so we have to write rules to kind of extrude the building up and also extrude it down where you have a foundation. And you can see the sort of road coming through, and same with the streets. And so inside of City Engine, we did all of these rules to kind of mass out the existing buildings, and we still had some real goofy stuff happening there. And so what we ended up realizing we had to do is kind of tessellate all the shapes. And this allowed us to really just drape this right over top of the terrain. So everything sort of hugged nice and tight. Oh, I'm going backwards. And then a couple of other things that were important. This is the existing building. There were buildings that we called hero buildings. This is a public library. This is a Google Street View. We took that, we modeled it out in SketchUp. So we wanted to make sure there's a development being proposed across the street from the library. This is it inside of the game engine. This was a development being proposed. This was one of the ones that was too tall. We brought it into SketchUp and into the game engine. And this is yet another development that was getting proposed, brought it in. And if I sort of quickly tab over what we built for this community, I mentioned a sort of playable game. It's the same sort of experience where they can see existing conditions or the proposed development. And we also gave them the ability, you can see as soon as I step on this street, it's going to read the GIS information and tell me that which street I'm on. And so they were able to evaluate this development in real time. And so we're still building onto this. We also gave them the ability to capture their own photos. So if they want to take a screenshot, they can. And so this was this site where they, you can see the site's grading down, and they wanted to kind of sneak in that storefront. They were anticipating a long, drawn-out council meeting. The meeting lasted about 20 minutes. The planner could not believe it. One of the quickest meetings they've ever had, and they gave all the credit to us, giving them the ability. So a traditional planning process here, a plan is prepared, staff reviews it, gives the developer feedback, it goes to Plan Commission, Plan Commission gives feedback, then it goes to City Council gives feedback. This community has modified their development process to now a model submitted by a developer. We ask for it in SketchUp. We bring it into ArcGIS, into City Engine. We publish it into that immersive game engine, and their staff can review it. Their City Plan Commission can review it. And so what they do is they charge the developer now, like I think $1,500 to pay for our time to update this engine. And so, yeah, that's all I have for you. I'd be happy to answer any questions. I wanted to leave some time at the end for some questions. Those are some of my contact info. Some of those web scenes you can get to at that hla.fyi/ArcGIS online. You could also reach me on Twitter or LinkedIn. I can send you any link. And so with that, I hope you enjoyed it and be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much. That's really very interesting, and a great use of digital tools and innovations. I have just maybe a quick question. I noticed in one of the slides where you were showing how you move in and out of different applications, you made it sound very easy, but I wanted to ask different tools. Is it an easy transition and integration and seamless integration of data, or do you have to do a lot of your own coding to import and export between packages?
No, I mean, so we don't do any coding to export and import. What Collada, so Collada is sort of a platform neutral 3D, almost like a DXF. What DXF is to a DWG file in CAD. Collada or a .dae file is a software neutral 3D. So everything I think sort of ends up in either Collada or as a KMZ, which a KMZ is a Collada file. It's just usually wrapped up with geographic coordinates to place inside of Google Earth. But that's really how we get back and forth. Where it can get tricky is when you stray from a 0, 0 coordinate. And so when you start looking at a place on the Earth, we have latitude and longitude. And SketchUp loves things to be close to 0, 0. I mean, you can georeference things, but when you start getting far away from that 0, 0 axis, SketchUp can kind of visually glitch out at times. Game engines, forget about it. I mean, you need to be as close to 0, 0 as possible. And so what we end up writing down is sort of a geographic offset. So if I'm in GIS, I look at my latitude and longitude of my site, and I basically write down how many hundreds of thousands of feet do I got to offset north and east to get this thing back to 0, 0 inside the game engine. And then we almost always include what we call reference squares. So if we're designing something here, off on the side, off of the canvas are these squares that we know we can match up off camera to make sure everything sort of clicks together.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. We have a question from one of the participants. It says, I was wondering if there was land use spatial data available for the US, data like portions of land used for commercial activities, residential blocks, parkland, etc.
No, not really. There are some data sets that you can purchase. There's nothing available for free. When we do a study, we almost always make it our first step to go collect it by driving around. There are things like OpenStreetMap that would have some, but I think as the democratization of geospatial data is happening, and Esri has been really pushing this. The first place I always look if I'm looking for data is I'll type in like city name open data portal. And if they've implemented Esri's open data portal, it'll show up, and then I look for parcels. But there's no national data set for land use.
Very good. I had another question. You showed some really very interesting examples, but probably these were pre-COVID. I was wondering, I mean, it's a non-technical question, but as a city planner, as an urban planner, are you noticing some changes in client requirements, especially perhaps, regarding densification, regarding more use of outdoor spaces and similar?
Oh, absolutely. I would say density was a bad word here 10 years ago, and what we are finding is that communities are starting to embrace density. There's a housing crisis in the United States. I mean, we have some cities in California where people are just living in their cars and in campers. So we're starting to see more intensification of our built out areas and more. I mean, I live in a what I'd call a traditional suburb. It's called Naperville. It's mostly single family. We just approved what's called a micro unit development. They turned a motel into apartments. So the apartments are only 350 square feet each. So I think people are trying to solve this housing crunch that we're in creatively in ways that before I don't think we would have saw.
Mm-hmm. Very good. There's another question. In Australia here, the concepts of 20-minute and 30-minute neighborhoods has been suggested a number of times. Is that a thing in the US, and what are your thoughts on it?
Do you mean like I'm trying to think? We had a principle that I teach when I taught at the University of Illinois, where it's basically the neighborhood unit principle, in that a neighborhood is almost a self-sufficient area. Yeah, and I think it's I can't think of his name. It's not Clarence Perry. Yes, it is. It is something when we do. There are still cities we work in. That's I think the challenging part of being a consultant is I can't go into the cities that we're working in and sort of give them my vision for their community. I'm not a resident there, and I work all over the United States. what I need to do is listen to a community and help them articulate their vision. What we do though is if we tell them that there isn't enough multifamily, and we help them down a road where we know you want all this area to be residential, but the people who live there are going to need places to shop, and they're going to need parks, and they're going to need schools. So we do balance land use. I don't know if we strict or stay strict to the neighborhood unit principle, but I'd say it's something almost in our DNA that when we start planning out these areas, we try to make sure at some level they're self-sufficient. And the other thing that we do a lot of promoting too is access to, well, really public health has become such a lens here. So access to healthy food, how close are they to stores and to markets, community gardens, parks and open space. And it's really, I think, yeah, I'd say at this point, I'd say that's in our DNA. And I don't know if it's something that we evaluate after the fact, but as we're playing it out, we kind of make sure that it's a balanced mix of uses.
Thank you. There's another question. So any special tactics to share with us for getting people, those especially not digitally gifted, to engage with some of the tools that you have showed us?
I mean, to use them or to learn them, I guess would be my question. How do you learn them?
To engage with them, probably. I mean, yeah. Sometimes do you find resistance, for example, from clients?
Oh,
yeah.
So the outreach tool map.social, I built that, and I used my mom as my test subject, because at the end of the day, the user is going to be a resident in a community who is my mom, right? If a city planner is going to be developing or come up with a plan for her city, she's going to be, and people her age are going to be the people that are providing input. And so I was constantly sort of saying here, hey, Mom, can you go in and make a map of your community? And when she lives in Windsor, Ontario, can you make a map of Windsor? And I'd get her feedback. And so we did test it out with really the parents of everyone in the office. And it was only then when we were satisfied that people could use it is when we rolled it out. I've heard some people say, well, City Engine is too confusing and SketchUp's too confusing, and they need to make it easier. And it needs to be so easy. I even heard someone say this, like, my mom should be able to use it. And I'm like, my mom isn't using SketchUp or City Engine or Photoshop. I mean, these are professional tools for professionals. It's the reason we get paid what we get paid and why our skills are sought after. And so there is a steep learning curve to this technology. I would say of all of them, though, SketchUp's probably the easiest. It functions like how you draw with pen and paper. Where I see people who struggle with SketchUp are people that have learned like 3ds Max or AutoCAD or Revit, and then try to learn SketchUp. And I think because SketchUp is so intuitive, I think they struggle with it. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, the games for sure. I think what I saw in that community in North Carolina was like the mayor was like my age, and I'm in my mid 40s. I grew up playing video games. I sit down on the keyboard and my hands go to W, A, S, and D to move a first person character through a world. It's just sort of a natural reaction. And so I think as the generation grows up and these people that have always played video games their entire life, I think there is just a ton of potential for the game engine to be a good vehicle to get people into technology.
Thank you so much. I'm just conscious of the time. Well, actually, we're spot on, coming up to the 1 hour. Thank you so much. That was really enlightening and and really good to see the visualization. And again, I think you made it look very easy, but there's a lot of expertise and experience in what you do. So thank you for sharing that with us, and thank you for staying up late to present to Swinburne. And also thank you, Chris, for facilitating this seminar, and we look forward to more of these in the near future. So thank you everyone for attending as well. And thank you, Paul, for your help in setting it up.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.